EASIT, Easy Access for Social Inclusion Training.
This is Unit 3A, Easy to Understand Language and Subtitling. Element 1, Processes. Video lecture, Validation of Easy to Understand Subtitles. My name is Rocío Bernabé from the Internationale Hochschule Este in München in Germany. This video lecture discusses the concept of validation in easy to understand contexts. First, we will reflect on why validation is necessary and the tasks. Then, we will learn about the types of roles. Lastly, we will look into the stages of a validation workflow. This video lecture is based on the validation scheme for audiovisual content, which has been developed by Óscar García from Plena Inclusión Madrid in Spain and myself. The original validation scheme was developed by Plena Inclusión Madrid for printed texts. You can find a description of both schemes on the reading list. Validation in easy-to-understand context is a concept similar to that of reviewing in translation as defined in the standard ISO 70100. Therefore, we can say that validation directly affects the quality of and delivery of easy-to-understand audiovisual content. Validation tasks aim to assess the quality of a text and to recommend corrections. Quality is assessed in terms of language, purpose, and suitability for the target group and domain. That is, whether the language itself is easy to read, easy to understand, and linguistically correct. Also, whether a text serves the same function as its standard counterpart. Lastly, domain, as the extent to which the appropriate style has been used, and terminology has been adequately explained. For instance, subtitles for news should be simplified so that the content is easy to understand while keeping the spirit of such a text type. For instance, tone, ideas, or word-level features that make the text acceptable and useful for a piece of news. Lastly, corrections. Once validators have spotted these elements or features that need to be changed, they provide alternatives. Validators do not work alone. Indeed, validation processes in easy-to-understand contexts are always collaborative and take place in small teams of 2 people or in groups. 2 main job roles in validations are facilitators and validators. Validators are persons with reading or learning difficulties who have been trained in easy-to-read guidelines. Validators are always persons with reading and learning difficulties and therefore users of easy-to-read or plain language. In turn, facilitators are in charge of organizing the validation sessions and facilitating the process. That is, to moderate the group and to gather the necessary input. In a way, facilitators orchestrate the validation process, like conductors do. Validation can take place in a small team with a validator and a facilitator, yet validation often takes place in groups. Validation groups are similar to focus groups and include persons with varied reading skills and comprehension degrees, in order to avoid biases. Plena Inclusión Madrid proposes validation groups of 4 to 6 people and working sessions of 1 to 2 hours where possible. Let's take a look at the different stages of a validation process. The tasks in stage 1 are organizational ones. The facilitator organizes the sessions and gathers validators and briefs them on the subject. Then, in stage 2, the reviewing process starts. For example, in the case of subtitles, validators will watch the content to identify difficulties. Validators will assess visual aspects, editorial aspects, and the use of contextual information. These parameters you know already from the previous video lectures. So, Once the difficulties have been spotted and discussed, the facilitator moderates the discussion. Stage 3 begins with the end of the discussion. In Stage 3, a list of consensual solutions for each difficulty will be created and passed on to the translator or writer, in this case, the subtitler, who will implement the corrections. This is done in Stage 4. Lastly, Stage 5, which includes a final group viewing to approve the final version. To recap up to here, we can say that validation in easy-to-understand context is a collaborative process that is similar to that of reviewing in translation. We can also say that it is a human-centered process because it involves stakeholders such as facilitators and end users. Validation is also iterative, as for it is repeated until a final consensual version has been approved by validators. Validation is also a time-consuming task. This results sometimes in other types of validation that only focus on the compliance with the text simplification rules. In such cases, validation is carried out by experts in easy-to-read or plain language, but it does not include end users. I would like to end this video lecture by mentioning the use of a quality logo after a validation process. This procedure is quite common in easy-to-read context, but it is not standardized in all countries. The most known quality logo is that of Inclusion Europe, which is a blue square with a white pictogram in the middle. The logo shows a person reading a book. A thumbs up appears in one of the sides of the book. Of course, there are also other quality logos. For instance, in Germany, we have the quality logo of the End Users Association Netzwerk Leichte Sprache or that of Hildesheim. So what does it mean that a text displays a quality logo? The use of these logos is restricted to texts that have been validated by end users, meaning according to the scheme that we have discussed in this video lecture. The use of a quality logo also means that a validated text cannot be changed afterwards without undergoing end user validation anew. To recap, we can say that validation in easy-to-understand contexts is a well-defined process. This workflow can be adapted to validate audiovisual content. Because the process itself is quite time-consuming, we will have to develop strategies to validate large amounts of content in the future. Another interesting question that we need to answer and research is whether interlingual translations of validated content also need to undergo the same type of validation. As for now, thank you very much for your attention. Goodbye. This video lecture has been prepared by Rocío Bernabé and Piero Cavallo from the Internationale Hochschule STI München. You can reach me at rocio.bernabé@sti-münchen.de.
The project EASIT has received funding from the European Commission under the Erasmus Plus Strategic Partnerships for Higher Education Programme, Grant Agreement 2018-1 ES01 KA203 05275. The European Commission's support for the production of this publication does not constitute an endorsement of the contents, which reflect the views only of the authors, and the Commission cannot be held responsible for any use which may be made of the information contained therein. This work is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution, Share Alike 4.0 International License. Partners of the EASIT project: Universitat Autónoma de Barcelona, Università degli Studi di Trieste, Universidade de Vigo, Stiftung Universität Hildesheim, SDI München, Dyslexie Verbundet, Radio Televizija Slovenija, Zavod RISA. EASIT, Easy Access for Social Inclusion Training.